It's those Balkans again. We know where they are, but what are they? It's a continuing question with no continuing answers. Anyone who remembers the 1990s will understand. Should the EU involve itself more or get well out? Join me, Jan Darasz, for How We Got Here.
Following the European Union's greatest enlargement to date in 2004, which saw 10 countries join the bloc, many expected that the rate of expansion would be maintained by the candidacy of the Balkan nations. Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Croatia, Kosovo, North Macedonia, Montenegro and Serbia have long sought EU membership. However, so far only Croatia has been successful, joining the EU in 2013. EU efforts to integrate the Balkan nations have faced numerous delays, mainly due to opposition from individual member states and insufficient progress made by the Balkan countries in reaching the accession requirements. According to experts, the majority of Balkan nations have seen underwhelming progress or even regress in crucial areas of democratic development, such as civil liberties, minority rights, fair elections, the rule of law, reform of the judiciary and public administration, as well as the fight against corruption and organized crime. Moreover, the aftermath of the violent ethnic conflicts that accompanied the breakup of the former Yugoslavia in the 1990s is another obstacle for some countries to make progress in accession negotiations. The European geopolitical landscape changed dramatically following Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, prompting the EU to prioritize new potential members from Eastern Europe, namely Ukraine, Moldova and Georgia. This shift has not gone unnoticed by the Balkan nations, sparking a fear of being diplomatically overshadowed. The EU eventually decided to revive the stalled accession talks, granting Bosnia candidate status in December 2022 and starting negotiations in March 2024. Albania and North Macedonia also saw progress, with negotiations starting in July 2022. The EU has also proposed a new growth plan for the Balkans, allocating €6 billion to the region for the period from 2024 to 2027. The EU's approach aims to accelerate the integration of Balkan candidates into the European single market by providing both financial incentives and strategic support.
Well, I'm delighted to welcome our guest today, Marta Szpala. She's a political scientist at the Centre for Eastern Studies. Welcome to the programme.
Thank you for hosting me.
Great to have you. We were chatting earlier about the position of the Balkans, former Yugoslavia, and your speciality, Western Balkans in particular, and you noted a sense of disappointment with the EU. Can you just kind of expand on that for us?
Yeah.
Please?
So we have to have in mind that some countries are waiting for the membership for quite a long. Macedonia North is the best example. He gained the candidacy in 2005. It was better prepared back then than Croatia to the membership, and still it hasn't officially opened the negotiations. So you can see that it's like whole generation who's in this waiting room. But first of all, just after collapse of communism, Yugoslavia was supposed to be the first country to join the EU. Everybody thought, and the people in the then European community thought that Yugoslavia is quite good prepared. It's better economically, doing better economically than Poland. It has infrastructure, strong administration. It wasn't the case in case of Central Europe. And now we can see that we in Poland are EU members for 20 years, and the ex-Yugoslavian countries are still waiting. Only Slovenia and Croatia were able to join EU. Some of the countries were able to join NATO, like Macedonia North, Montenegro, but still they are waiting for this dream to be fulfilled, like joining the EU and the safe zone of European community.
So what happened? How do you account for this waiting room?
Yeah,
Balkan waiting room.
This is the good question, and actually things people are quarreling about a lot. Who to blame? The weak states in the Western Balkans or the EU not willing to expand after big expansion in 2004 and 2007. Of course, war happened, and war destroyed a lot of things in the Western Balkans, especially Bosnia, also Serbia and Croatia.
Yes.
This war legacy, which influenced the increase of organized crime, corruption, and a lot of negative tendencies. And now we have a bunch of very weak states with the political elites which officially support the EU enlargement, but what they are interested most is to have strong grip of power in their constituencies, and this is the biggest problem, that they don't want to join the EU because it will weaken their position. This is the famous case of Ivo Sanader, the former Prime Minister of Croatia, who did the reform, who enhanced the position of judiciary and then end up in prison for the corruption. So this is this kind of warning sign for all the people or the elites in the Western Balkans, that implementing the EU reform would mean that they will have to face the justice someday, so they don't want to do so.
I remember, I think it was sometime in the early 1990s, it was the Prime Minister of Luxembourg or the Foreign Minister saying, now is the time for Europe, now is Europe's time, when he was talking about the pre-war or the Yugoslavia that was about to break up. And it seems you talked about the oligarchs, the system there, but it's also a degree of failure by the EU vision. It represents this huge strategic failure, given the sentiments that it expressed in the 1990s.
Yeah, I think that somehow this is also the problem of the Western Balkans, that they are surrounded by the EU and NATO countries. So somehow in the EU there was no consciousness of the urgency, because like the Western Balkans are part of the Europe. The EU countries, they have influence there. There is no such influence from Russia. But this is also the thing of the people of the Western Balkans. For example, for us in Poland, it was also the matter of geopolitical security, because we were afraid of Russia. This is also the case now in Ukraine, that they are very motivated to implement the reform because they want to join the security sphere of the West. In case of the Western Balkans, people there, they always feel that they are part of the Europe. They don't have to join the Europe because Yugoslavia was part of the Western Europe. They were between the blocks, but they were definitely more embedded in the Western Europe structure of cooperation.
Yes, it was seen like a friendly friendly Soviet bloc country.
It wasn't Soviet bloc country.
Yes.
But the French communists, like this Western version, Western-friendly version of the communists. So that's why also the society didn't felt this pressure to really join the West, like we have this kind of feeling here in our region, and that was also the problem. So the EU also in their policy, in its policy towards the Western Balkans, somehow have this kind of feeling that, okay, situation is stable there, and we don't have to put too much effort for bringing these countries closer, because they are somehow part of Europe. And EU was so busy with internal problems. We have the financial crisis, then migrant crisis, Brexit happened, so there were always more urgent things to do than enlargement in the Western Balkans, and that was the problem.
Is this a vacuum that is being filled by the great powers, traditional great powers, Turkey, Russia, Germany?
Germany, I think like this is more what is now more important in the Western Balkans, bilateral relation with the EU members. Of course, there is a lot of information about Russia being active in the region, but Russia is far away. It is weakened definitely now, busy also with their wars and weakening of Russia influence in Central Asia, Caucasus, Ukraine war. It's also the thing. So of course, I think Russia pretends to be active there, but it's not really putting money or military equipment or military influence there. With Turkey, this is a different story. I think like Turkey is somehow feeling responsible for the region, but it has the same goal as the EU. They want stability there. China is also important. For China, Western Balkans, the region is a corridor. It's to the Europe, actually, and we can say it.
Massive investments.
Yeah. So, so I didn't. Of course, people in the Western Balkans, they would like to believe that their position hasn't changed since the First World War. They are still geopolitically important, but it's not the case. I think this is actually the problem of the region, that it is so unimportant that nobody really would like to invest political capital in solving the bilateral issue there and to push region towards the EU finally to just complete the European Union there in the region, there in whole continent, and that's a problem.
It's a very strategic region, obviously historically a very important region. How is the pro-EU sentiment divided? If we can paint a very broad brush picture, is it something that's shared by the younger generation, the urban elites, the educated? What's the picture like when you move away from the main capitals in the Western Balkans?
I think generally people still support EU enlargement, but they just don't believe it will happen anytime soon or in perspective for their lives, and this is the biggest problem. So of course, like the most pro-European countries are Kosovo, Albania, Montenegro also, but in the case of other countries like in Serbia, the support is very weak. We don't have credible opinion polls, but according the one we have, it's like 40-50% of the population. In case of Albania and Kosovo, it's almost 90%. But the thing is that people now they just decided to go. We call it to join the EU on an individual basis, so just to move to the EU. And we can see that there is huge influx of migration from the Western Balkans, because those who are educated, active, they are just leaving. We have empty villages everywhere in the Balkans. People just don't believe that staying there and waiting for the EU to come will ever happen, and that's the problem. And also they are not pushing elites too much to do the reform. The people are just, okay, the Europe will never come to us, so we will go to Europe.
So it seems a very dismal picture of the future for the Western Balkans. It seems like you're painting a picture of a region that you go to holiday, wonderful weather, sea, that kind of stuff, quaint villages, empty villages, to search for the picturesque. The Western.
I think especially in Western Europe, but also here in Poland, we have this kind of vision or image of Balkans with great food, hospitable people, great music, beautiful landscape, mountains, old buildings, very interesting.
Raki and all the beautiful, delicious drinks.
Of course, alcohol, very good. Wines, the wine production is very developing. So some people are staying, and tourist is important, especially for Albania, Macedonia, also in Serbia. It starts to be the case. People are visiting, but in terms of young generation, a lot of IT sector is there, it's developing, but at one point when they decided to have a kids and they see that, especially when we are speaking about public services, hospitals, administration, they see that this all public services, they are very weak, and that's why they are deciding to move to the EU, especially Germany. And what is also somehow part of the problem, they are very welcome migrants because they are educated, they are quickly assimilating to the European population. So everybody actually wants workers from the Western Balkans, but that means that in the region they are mainly old people who are this kind of clientelistic network for the oligarchs who are in power, and there is nobody also to demand the change from the government to do something about that. People are just leaving because they are disappointed.
So how do you see the region in the next couple of years? Is it going to, are the tensions, the ethnic tensions, the political tensions going to explode? Do you fear another repetition of a Yugoslavian war? Is it going to get fractionated even further?
I think this is. I don't think there will be a tension because political elites, they are playing with the fears, they are playing with the tensions. It's also their strategy towards the EU because they want support of the EU politicians to have all region in peace and stability. So of course, we will have more tension. If they develop into the military conflict, I don't think so. I think you have to have people to fight for some causes and to have a war. And nobody now in Western Balkans is believing that war is solution to anything. They are not ready to fight in another war. They are still remember the drama of the last one. But I think what is the most problematic, that we see corruption, we see organized crime, we have a lot of problems with drugs, money laundering. And this is a problem for the EU. We know that the guns which were used in the Bataclan attack in France, the guns were coming from the Western Balkans. So we have this kind of blind spot of or safe haven for organized crime and terrorist group, and this is very problematic. We have also migration going through the Western Balkans to the EU, so there are a lot of threats to security of European Union coming from the Western Balkans, and having them not reform without the proper rule of law, without the judiciary, and that is a problem really for and I think this is a bigger threat than the real military conflict.
You mentioned the rule of law. Final question to you.
Yeah.
Is the answer the rule of an empire, the law of an empire, to get some stability in it? It's a very brutal question. We have the Ottomans, the Serbian, the greatest Serbian nationalist dream, Yugoslavia, unitary government, governing. Is that totally off the imagination?
Okay, I think EU can and has the influence and tools to really build the rule of law regime there, but they just don't want to. And this is the biggest problem of the Western Balkans. So we have this kind of, we are coming back to this period of Ottomans that, nobody was strong enough or interested enough to really control the region fully and bring it closer.
Yes.
So that's the problem.
A final question then to you. Do you see, if we're moving to the Ukrainian example, do you see a repetition of that sort of thinking by the EU? Yes, you'll come in, we'll welcome you, and then the country has to wait for another 20, 30 years, like in the Balkans?
I think it's the big risk, because I don't think that anybody in the EU really rethink what happened to the Western Balkans and realizing of the huge consequences of this very hectic policy of the EU in the region. And when I see we have a lot of great words, we are welcoming you, we are supporting the rule of law and reform, we can see still that the EU it's making the same mistakes. Now we have this kind of idea of expectation and management. Don't rush too much. We have to implement the reform. I think Polish case is the best example that the dates in enlargement are very important and quick reform. You know, it's like I have the friends from the Western Balkans and they are saying, we are tired of this reform mood. We are in the process of transformation for 30 years and we are fed up with that. So if the reforms are painful, they have to be really quick. This is the case. What I find very interesting and what I think it's a sign of hope for the Ukraine, that society is very desperate and motivated to join the EU because of the security reason. Like this threat from Russia makes both the elites and society very devoted to the reform process. And this is the difference between the Ukraine and the Western Balkans. There they are not, they feel so European, they don't have this kind of strong motivation by the threat of Russia to do the reform. And in the case of Ukraine, it's different.
I suppose it's a kind of age-old thing when you raise expectations and then don't meet them. That's when the problem starts. Marta Szpala, thank you very much for coming on to the programme.
Thank you very much for having me here.
So that's all we have time for today. Please join us next time for How We Got Here.